I'm Cassandra Vale. I'm 26, and last night at my sister's housewarming party in Willowbrook Heights, she introduced me to her new neighbors as the ugly duckling of the family who works at some random boutique downtown. She said it with that perfectly practiced laugh of hers, the one that makes cruelty sound like affection. Standing there in her pristine white sundress, diamond tennis bracelet catching the light from her crystal chandelier, my sister Vivienne had no idea that the random boutique she was mocking was actually the flagship store of Lumière Fashion House, one of the most exclusive luxury retailers in the country. What she also didn't know was that in exactly 18 hours, Vogue would be announcing something that would flip our entire family dynamic on its head. Because I'm not just some sales girl folding clothes in a forgotten corner of the fashion world. I'm not the awkward, gangly teenager she still sees when she looks at me. I'm certainly not the unfortunate-looking sister she spent the last 8 years apologizing for to her social circle. I'm Cassandra Vale, and in less than 24 hours, the entire world would know me by a different name entirely. One that graces billboards from Milano to Manhattan. One that luxury brands fight million-dollar contracts over. One that has made me more money in the past 3 years than my sister's investment banker husband makes in a decade. But to my family, especially to Vivienne, I'm still just Cassie, the girl with the frizzy hair and crooked teeth who couldn't get a date to senior prom, the one they whisper about at family gatherings with that mixture of pity and embarrassment that cuts deeper than any blade. Last night's party was peak Vivienne. Everything orchestrated to perfection in her new 4-bedroom colonial in the most prestigious neighborhood in Willowbrook Heights. The guest list read like a who's who of local society. Her husband Trevor's law firm partners, the country club president, the mayor's wife, and half the board members from the exclusive Willowbrook Yacht Club. These weren't just neighbors, they were carefully curated connections. Each invitation strategic, each conversation calculated to elevate Vivienne's social standing even higher. I should have known better than to attend. I should have stayed in my penthouse apartment in Meridian City, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the harbor, the one that cost more than most people make in a lifetime. I should have been preparing for tomorrow's shoot with renowned photographer Alessandro Torretti, or reviewing the contracts my agency had sent over for the upcoming campaigns with 3 major European fashion houses. Instead, I found myself standing in Vivienne's perfectly manicured backyard, wearing a simple black dress I'd grabbed from my normal person wardrobe. The clothes I keep for family events, carefully chosen to blend in, to not outshine, to maintain the illusion that I'm still the awkward little sister who needs protection from the harsh realities of the world. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Vivienne was introducing me as someone who works retail, I was actually wearing a prototype dress from next season's Armani collection, a piece that wouldn't hit stores for another 6 months, something that had been hand-delivered to my apartment by the designer's personal assistant just 3 days earlier. The cheap jewelry she probably assumed I'd bought at some department store clearance sale was actually a custom Cartier piece, on loan for an upcoming red carpet event. But that's the thing about family. They see you frozen in time, locked in the version of yourself that fits their narrative. To Vivienne and her circle, I would always be the girl who got picked last for teams in gym class, the one who spent lunch periods in the library because sitting alone in the cafeteria was too humiliating, the sister who made their Christmas card photos unbalanced because of my unfortunate genetics. What they couldn't see, what they refused to see, was how those same unfortunate genetics had become my greatest asset. The sharp cheekbones that made me look severe in high school photographs were now described as stunning and editorial by photographers. The height that made me tower awkwardly over classmates at school dances was now the industry standard that opened doors to runways in Paris and Milan. The unusual features that made me feel like an alien in suburban Willowbrook Heights were exactly what made me unforgettable in front of a camera. As I stood there last night listening to Vivienne explain to the mayor's wife that she was trying to help me find my place in the world, I thought about the text message sitting in my phone from my publicist. Final confirmation? Vogue announcement goes live tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern. Hope you're ready for everything to change. Everything to change. If only she knew that everything had already changed. 3 years ago, when I walked into that modeling agency in Meridian City on a dare from my college roommate, 2.5 years ago when I booked my first major campaign, 2 years ago when I graced my first magazine cover, 18 months ago when I signed the contract that made me one of the highest paid models in the industry. But tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow, the secret I had been keeping would become public knowledge. Tomorrow, the carefully constructed image of Cassie, the retail worker, would shatter completely, replaced by something that would leave my entire family speechless. Tomorrow, they would learn that their ugly duckling had been flying higher than any of them had ever dreamed possible. The only question was, would they finally see me for who I really was? Or would they find new ways to diminish what I'd accomplished? Vivienne delivered that line with her signature smile, the one she'd perfected during her sorority days at Thornfield University, bright and disarming, making her cruelty seem like sisterly concern. She placed her manicured hand on my shoulder, squeezing just a little too tight, and continued her performance for Mrs. Caldwell, the mayor's wife. "Poor Cassie here has been struggling to find herself since college," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "She's been working at this little clothing store downtown. What's it called again, sweetie? Lumière something? Folding clothes and helping customers. I keep telling her she needs to aim higher, maybe use that business degree for something more substantial." The small circle of women, all perfectly coiffed wives of Willowbrook Heights elite, nodded with that practiced look of concerned understanding that wealthy women have mastered. Mrs. Caldwell tilted her head sympathetically. "Oh, retail can be so challenging, but everyone has to start somewhere, dear." Trevor's law partner's wife, a woman whose Botox had frozen her face into permanent surprise, chimed in, "Have you considered real estate? My daughter started in retail too, but now she's selling million-dollar homes in Harbor Point." What none of them realized was that I owned a million-dollar home in Harbor Point. Well, technically a $3.2 million penthouse, but who's counting? And as for that little clothing store downtown, I wasn't just an employee. Last month, my single appearance at their VIP customer event generated more sales in one evening than most luxury boutiques see in an entire quarter. But here I stood, in my sister's perfectly manicured garden, letting them pat my head like I was a lost puppy who needed direction. What Vivienne didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was that while she was busy patronizing me in front of Willowbrook Heights society, my phone was buzzing with messages from agents, photographers, and fashion houses across 3 continents. The latest text, which I'd glimpsed while she was introducing me to the country club president's wife, was from my booking agent. "Milan confirmed for September Fashion Week. Versace wants you to open their show. Call me." Versace wanted me to open their show. Me, the girl Vivienne had just described as someone who needs to find direction in life. As the conversation continued around me, something about charity galas and yacht club memberships, I caught sight of something that made my blood freeze. Through the French doors leading into Vivienne's living room, there on the coffee table, spread across its surface like some kind of shrine, were fashion magazines. Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, Elle. Magazines that featured my face on their covers. Magazines where my name was printed in bold letters across glossy pages. Magazines that my sister apparently read religiously, judging by the perfect way they were arranged, without ever connecting the dots. Because in those magazines, I wasn't Cassie Vale, the awkward little sister from Willowbrook Heights. I was Serafina, just one name, like Cher or Madonna. The face that luxury brands fought over, the model who could sell out a product line with a single Instagram post. The truth is, I'm not just some lost 26-year-old woman working retail to pay the bills. I'm not the fashion industry wannabe that my family assumes I am, desperately clinging to some impossible dream of beauty and glamour. And I'm certainly not the failure that Vivienne presents me as to her pristine social circle. I'm Serafina. Just one name. That's all the fashion world needs to know. In the past 3 years, that single name has appeared on more magazine covers than most models see in their entire careers.
It's been whispered in the hallways of fashion houses from Milan to Tokyo, spoken with reverence by photographers who've built their reputations on capturing beauty, and printed in contracts worth more money than most people see in several lifetimes. While Vivienne was busy climbing the social ladder of Willowbrook Heights, marrying her way into country club acceptance, and measuring her worth by the square footage of her colonial home, I was walking runways that most models only dream of touching. The Chanel show in Paris, where I opened for Karl Lagerfeld's final collection, the Valentino campaign that was shot in the vineyards of Tuscany, where I spent 3 days being photographed by Annie Leibovitz herself, the Dior fragrance campaign that had my face plastered across Times Square for 6 months straight. But it goes deeper than just pretty pictures and glamorous locations. In an industry notorious for chewing up young women and spitting them out broken and forgotten, I've not just survived, I've dominated. My booking fee for a single day's work is more than my brother-in-law Trevor makes in 3 months at his prestigious law firm. The apartment I own in Marion City, the one that overlooks the harbor and comes with its own private elevator, cost more than my parents' house is worth, and I bought it in cash. The agency that represents me, Sterling & Associates, is the same agency that discovered some of the most iconic faces in fashion history. They don't take on just anyone. When I walked into their offices 3 years ago, fresh from college, with no portfolio, and wearing a borrowed dress, they saw something that I didn't even see in myself. You have that rare quality, the head scout told me within minutes of meeting me. The camera doesn't just like you, it loves you. And she was right. From my very first test shoot, something magical happened when I stepped in front of a camera. All those years of feeling awkward and out of place, all those moments when I towered over my classmates and felt like a giraffe among gazelles, suddenly made sense. The height that made me self-conscious in high school hallways was exactly what made me perfect for high fashion.
The sharp features that Vivienne always said made me look too intense were precisely what photographers called striking and unforgettable. My very first campaign was for a luxury jewelry brand called Celestial Diamonds. The creative director took one look at my portfolio, all 5 photos of it, and said, "This is the face we've been searching for." That single campaign launched everything. The photos were so stunning, so arresting, that they caught the attention of every major fashion house in New York. Suddenly, my phone was ringing with offers from brands I'd only dreamed of working with. Then came the breakthrough that changed everything. The cover of Vogue Italia. Not just any cover, the September issue, the most important issue of the year. I was photographed by Steven Meisel wearing a custom gown by Valentino that had been created specifically for the shoot. The headline read, "The Face of Tomorrow," and apparently, tomorrow was now. After that cover, the floodgates opened. Harper's Bazaar wanted me for their holiday issue. W Magazine booked me for a 12-page spread. Elle featured me in their Models to Watch section, though by then, everyone in the industry was already watching. The contracts started coming in so fast that I had to hire a business manager just to keep track of them all. But perhaps the most surreal moment came 6 months ago, when I was backstage at the Versace show in Milan. Donatella Versace herself approached me, something she rarely does with models. "Serafina," she said in her distinctive voice, "you embody everything our brand represents. Power, confidence, beauty without apology." She offered me an exclusive contract on the spot, a deal that would make me the face of Versace for the next 3 years, with a guaranteed minimum income that exceeded what most Fortune 500 CEOs earn. I accepted, of course. How could I not? But as I signed those papers in her office overlooking the Quadrilateral della Moda, I thought about my family back in Willowbrook Heights. They had no idea that their struggling daughter and sister was about to become one of the highest-paid models in the world. The strangest part isn't even the money or the fame. It's the transformation. When I'm Serafina, I'm not the awkward girl who spent high school hiding behind baggy clothes and hoping no one would notice me. I'm confident, powerful, magnetic. I walk into rooms and conversations stop. I wear clothes that cost more than cars, and somehow they look like they were designed specifically for my body.
But every time I come home to Willowbrook Heights, I slip back into being Cassie. Quiet, overlooked, apologetic for taking up space. I shrink myself down to fit into their perception of who I should be. I let them believe their version of my story because it's easier than shattering their worldview. Until tomorrow. Tomorrow, when Vogue announces that Serafina will be gracing the cover of their landmark 130th anniversary issue, the most prestigious cover in fashion history, there will be no more hiding. No more quiet little Cassie who works at a boutique. No more family disappointment who needs career advice from Trevor's law partner's wives. Tomorrow, they'll finally see what I've become. The moment that would change everything came when Mrs. Thornfield, the wife of Willowbrook Heights' most prominent plastic surgeon, decided to take a particular interest in my so-called career struggles. She had been observing our conversation from across the patio while nursing her third glass of Vivienne's expensive Bordeaux, and something about my situation seemed to activate her need to dispense unsolicited life advice. "Vivienne, darling," she called out, her voice carrying that particular tone wealthy women use when they're about to deliver what they consider profound wisdom. "Bring your sister over here. I have someone she simply must meet." Vivienne's eyes lit up with the kind of excitement she always got when she sensed an opportunity to showcase her charitable nature, specifically her efforts to help her tragically unsuccessful sister. She practically dragged me across the stone patio towards Mrs. Thornfield, who was standing beside a woman I didn't recognize, someone who clearly wasn't part of the usual Willowbrook Heights social circle. "Cassie," Vivienne announced with barely contained glee, "I want you to meet Rebecca Morrison. She's a talent scout from the city, and Mrs. Thornfield thinks she might be able to help you with your situation." Rebecca Morrison looked me up and down with the practiced eye of someone who evaluated people for a living. She was younger than I expected, probably early 30s, dressed in the way that suggested she worked in fashion or entertainment, but wasn't quite at the level where she could afford the luxury brands she clearly coveted. Her assessment of me was thorough, and I could tell, initially dismissive. "So you're interested in the fashion industry?" Rebecca asked, her tone suggesting she was already preparing to deliver gentle disappointment. "It's a tough business, especially for someone who's starting late. Most successful models begin their careers in their teens." The irony was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. Here was a woman who clearly worked on the periphery of the industry I had already conquered, preparing to explain to me why I'd never make it in fashion. Meanwhile, my phone had been buzzing intermittently all evening with messages from some of the most powerful people in that very industry.
Mrs. Thornfield leaned in closer, clearly delighted to be facilitating what she saw as a potential life-changing moment for the poor, lost Vale sister. Rebecca represents several modeling agencies in Meridian City. She was just telling me about how difficult it is to break into high fashion these days, especially for girls who don't have the right connections. "The truth is," Rebecca continued, warming to her subject, "the modeling world is incredibly exclusive. It's not just about being pretty, though that's certainly important. You need the right look, the right height, the right bone structure, and even then, success is never guaranteed. I see hundreds of hopefuls every month, and maybe 1 in 1,000 has what it takes to book even local commercial work." Vivienne nodded sagely, as if she were absorbing crucial information about an industry she knew absolutely nothing about. "Cassie has always been interested in fashion," she said, which was news to me considering she'd spent the last 8 years mocking my appearance. "Though I keep telling her she needs to be realistic about her expectations." "Exactly right," Rebecca agreed. "The girls who make it to the top, and I'm talking about real success, magazine covers, international campaigns, they're not just models. They're brands unto themselves. They have teams of agents, publicists, stylists. They command fees that most people can't even imagine. But getting to that level," she shook her head sadly, "it's like winning the lottery." The conversation was becoming surreal.
Here was this woman who had probably never been within 50 feet of a major fashion show, explaining to me exactly what my life looked like on a daily basis. Every detail she described, the teams, the fees, the international campaigns, was already my reality. What about those supermodels we see everywhere? The ones on all the magazine covers? Surely they started somewhere ordinary. Rebecca laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. Oh, those girls? Models like Serafina? They're unicorns, 1 in a million. Serafina, for instance, she's probably the most sought-after model in the world right now. But she's not someone you become. She's someone you're born to be. The bone structure, the presence, the camera love, it's all genetic lottery. My heart stopped. She was talking about me. This woman was standing 3 feet away from me, explaining to my sister and her friends why someone like me could never become someone like me. I've actually worked on a few shoots where Serafina was the featured model. Not directly with her, of course. Someone at my level doesn't interact with talents of that caliber. But I was there for the client side of a jewelry campaign last year. The entire production stopped when she walked on set. I've never seen anything like it. Vivienne was hanging on every word, fascinated by this glimpse into a world she'd only seen in magazines. What's she like, Serafina? Untouchable, obviously, but it's more than that. She has this presence, this confidence. When she's in front of a camera, she becomes something otherworldly. The photographer we were working with said she's the most naturally gifted model he's encountered in 30 years in the business. The photographer she was referring to had to be Marcus Delacroix, who had shot the Eternal Elegance jewelry campaign I'd done last spring. I remembered that shoot vividly, not because of Rebecca, who must have been part of the client team I'd barely noticed, but because Marcus had indeed said those exact words to me during a break between setups. But what I'm trying to explain, Rebecca continued, turning back to me with a kind smile that was supposed to soften the blow she was about to deliver, is that girls like Serafina are essentially genetic lottery winners. They didn't become successful through hard work or determination, though I'm sure they work hard once they reach that level. They were simply born with something the rest of us don't have. Mrs. Thornfield nodded sympathetically and patted my arm. But that doesn't mean you can't find success in your own way, dear. Perhaps local catalog work or even fitness modeling. The moment hung in the air like a blade waiting to fall. Here they were, my sister and her friends, along with this industry insider explaining to me why I could never achieve what I had already achieved, describing in detail the exact life I was living while standing right in front of them. Rebecca pulled out her business card and handed it to me with practiced professionalism. Look, I don't want to discourage you entirely. If you're serious about this, come see me next week. I can't promise anything major, but maybe we can find you some small commercial work to start building a portfolio. I took the card, staring down at it while my mind raced. Tomorrow's Vogue announcement was less than 18 hours away. Tomorrow, every person at this party would know exactly who I was. But right now, in this moment, I had a choice to make. I could continue playing the role of struggling little sister, accepting this woman's condescending offer to help me achieve a fraction of what I had already accomplished. Or I could end this charade right here, right now. Actually, I said quietly, looking up from the business card to meet Rebecca's eyes directly, I think there might be some confusion about what I do. The group fell silent, sensing something in my tone that hadn't been there before.
Before I tell you what happened next, before I reveal how I responded to Rebecca's condescending offer and my sister's pitying looks, I need to pause and ask you something important. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where the people who are supposed to know you best have created such a completely false version of who you are that correcting them feels impossible? Have you ever sat at a family dinner, listening to relatives discuss your life like you're not even there, making assumptions about your failures and limitations while having absolutely no clue about your actual accomplishments? Have you ever wanted to stand up and scream the truth, but knew that doing so would shatter not just their perception of you, but their entire understanding of how the world works? If you've ever been the family member everyone underestimates, if you've ever hidden your success to avoid making others feel small, if you've ever let people believe lies about your life because the truth seemed too big for them to handle, then you know exactly what I was feeling in that moment on Vivienne's patio. Drop a comment below and tell me about a time when your family completely misunderstood who you really were. Hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and defending your truth. And if you've ever wondered what it feels like to live a double life, where your professional success exists in a completely different universe from your family relationships, stay tuned, because what happens next will blow your mind. Because here's what most people don't understand about family dynamics. Sometimes the people who love you most are the ones who see you least clearly. They get stuck in old patterns, old stories, old versions of who you used to be. And the more successful you become, the harder it gets to bridge that gap between who they think you are and who you've actually become. My family had created this narrative about me, the struggling sister, the one who couldn't quite figure out her life, the disappointment who needed constant guidance and support. And I had enabled that narrative by staying quiet, by not correcting their assumptions, by showing up to family events dressed down and deflecting questions about my work. But why? Why would someone hide a supermodel career from their own family? Why would I let my sister introduce me as a retail worker when I could have walked into that party wearing a dress worth more than her car? The answer is complicated. And it goes to the heart of what happens when families refuse to let you grow beyond the role they've assigned you. When I first started modeling, I tried to share my excitement with them. I called Vivienne after my first professional shoot, practically vibrating with joy. Her response? "That's nice, Cassie. Just don't get your hopes up too high. You know how these things usually work out." When I booked my first magazine cover, I brought a copy to Sunday dinner at our parents' house. My mother glanced at it politely and said, "How lovely, dear. But when are you going to think about getting a real job?" My father didn't even look up from his newspaper. The message was clear. Your success isn't real. Your accomplishments don't matter. And you're fooling yourself if you think this modeling thing is anything more than a temporary distraction from finding your true purpose in life. So I stopped trying. I stopped sharing the magazine covers, the campaign shoots, the international travel. I stopped mentioning the photographers I worked with, the celebrities I met, the designers who created custom pieces for me. Instead, I created this elaborate cover story about working at Lumière Fashion House, which was technically true, since I did appear at their events, just not as an employee. The psychological toll of living this double life is something I never anticipated. When you're Serafina, you're confident, powerful, in control. You walk into rooms knowing you belong there. You speak with authority because you've earned your place at the table. But when you're Cassie, sitting in your sister's backyard listening to her friends offer career advice about an industry you've already conquered, you start to question your own reality. There were moments when I wondered if I was losing my mind. Was I really Serafina, the supermodel who graced magazine covers and walked runways in Milan? Or was I just Cassie, the retail worker who lived in a fantasy where she imagined herself as someone important? The line between my two identities became so blurred that sometimes I felt like I was playing a role in both worlds. And then there was the guilt of knowing that while my sister struggled to make partner at her marketing firm, while my cousins worried about student loans and mortgage payments, I was earning more in a month than they made in a year. The guilt of letting them pay for family dinners when I could have bought the entire restaurant without thinking twice. The guilt of watching my parents worry about retirement savings when I could have solved their financial concerns with a single wire transfer. But perhaps the deepest guilt came from recognizing that my success challenged everything my family believed about fairness, hard work, and who deserves what in life. Vivienne had followed all the rules: good grades, prestigious university, corporate job, suitable marriage. She had earned her success through traditional means, checking off every box society told her mattered. How could I explain that I had stumbled into a career that paid me millions for doing something that barely felt like work?
The modeling industry is built on genetic lottery, on being born with the right combination of features and proportions. There's no meritocracy in having cheekbones that photograph well, or being naturally 6 feet tall. I hadn't earned my bone structure through studying or hard work or moral virtue. I had simply won a biological jackpot that my family couldn't understand or celebrate. So, standing there on Vivienne's patio, holding Rebecca Morrison's business card while she explained why someone like me could never become someone like Serafina, I faced the same choice I had been avoiding for 3 years: continue the lie or blow up everything with the truth. The weight of that decision pressed down on me like a physical force. In less than 18 hours, the choice would be taken away from me entirely. The Vogue announcement would make my secret impossible to keep. But right now, in this moment, I still had control over how my family learned the truth. I could let them find out tomorrow, along with the rest of the world through social media and entertainment news, or I could tell them myself, right here, right now, and watch their entire understanding of reality crumble in real time. As I stood there, feeling the eyes of my sister, her friends, and this condescending industry insider on me, I made my choice. The lie that would define the next 3 years of my life began on a rainy Thursday evening in October, 3.5 years ago, when I walked into our family's favorite restaurant, Bella Corte, for what was supposed to be a celebration dinner. I had just signed my first major modeling contract, a 6-figure deal with Meridian Cosmetics that would put my face on billboards across the East Coast. I was 22, fresh out of college, and bursting with excitement about sharing my incredible news with the people I loved most. I had specifically chosen Bella Corte because it held so many happy family memories. It was where we celebrated graduations, promotions, and anniversaries. The warm lighting and intimate atmosphere seemed perfect for announcing that their youngest daughter had just landed a career that would change everything. I even wore my best dress, a simple black number that I'd splurged on with my signing bonus, and had my hair professionally styled for the occasion. My parents arrived first, followed by Vivienne and Trevor, who had just gotten engaged 6 months earlier and were still in that phase where they finished each other's sentences and made everyone else feel slightly nauseous. The conversation started typically enough: Dad discussing his law practice, Mom updating everyone on her book club, Vivienne showing off wedding venue photos on her phone. When the waiter took our appetizer orders and the initial family catch-up had settled into a comfortable rhythm, I decided it was time. My heart was racing with excitement as I cleared my throat and said, "Actually, I have some pretty amazing news to share with everyone." The table turned toward me with polite attention, the kind families give when they expect to hear about a new job at the local bank or perhaps news about finally deciding on graduate school. What they definitely weren't expecting was for me to announce that I had just been discovered by one of the most prestigious modeling agencies in the country. "I've been signed by Sterling and Associates," I began, unable to keep the joy out of my voice. "They're one of the top modeling agencies in Meridian City, and they've offered me a contract for a major cosmetics campaign. The fee is more than most people make in a year. And if things go well, there could be magazine covers, fashion shows, maybe even international work." The silence that followed was not the excited celebration I'd anticipated. Instead, it was the kind of silence that happens when someone has said something so unexpected that it takes time for the words to register. My father was the first to respond, setting down his wine glass with deliberate care. "Cassie, modeling isn't really a career. It's more of a hobby, something you do on the side while you figure out what you actually want to do with your life." My mother nodded in agreement, reaching across the table to pat my hand with the same gesture she'd used when I was 8 and announced I wanted to be a princess when I grew up.
Sweetheart, those modeling agencies prey on young girls like you. They make all sorts of promises about fame and fortune, but the reality is that only a handful of models ever make real money, and even then, it's not sustainable. What happens when you turn 30 and they don't want you anymore? Vivienne, who had been unusually quiet during this exchange, finally spoke up. Cassie, you have a business degree from Westfield College. You're smart, articulate, and capable of so much more than posing for pictures. Don't you think you're selling yourself short?
Trevor, ever the pragmatist, leaned forward with his lawyer expression. Have you actually read this contract? These modeling agencies are notorious for taking advantage of inexperienced girls. The fees they promise rarely materialize, and you could end up owing them money for photos and training you never needed. It's a legitimate contract, I insisted, my excitement rapidly deflating. I had it reviewed by an entertainment lawyer. The agency has represented some of the biggest names in fashion. This is real. But I could see in their faces that they had already decided what this was. A naive young woman being taken advantage of by an industry they didn't understand or respect. No amount of explaining the legitimacy of the agency or the specifics of the contract was going to change their minds. My father shifted into full protective mode. Look, sweetheart, we're not trying to crush your dreams. We just want you to be realistic. How many girls think they're going to become the next supermodel? How many actually succeed? The odds are astronomical. And even if you did somehow make it, my mother added, what kind of life is that? Constantly worried about your appearance, surrounded by superficial people, traveling to dangerous places for photo shoots? That's not the life we raised you for. The conversation continued to spiral downward from there. Every point I made about the agency's reputation was countered with warnings about industry exploitation. Every detail I shared about the campaign was met with skepticism about whether the money would actually materialize. Every dream I expressed about where this could lead was dismissed as unrealistic fantasy. By the time our entrees arrived, I had stopped trying to defend my decision. The excitement that had carried me into the restaurant had been systematically dismantled by the people who were supposed to support me unconditionally. I spent the rest of the dinner listening to Vivienne discuss wedding planning and Trevor debate tax law with my father, feeling like my announcement had never happened at all. The drive home was when I made the decision that would shape the next 3 years of my life. Instead of fighting to make them understand, instead of proving them wrong with future successes, I would simply let them believe what they wanted to believe. If they thought modeling was a frivolous pursuit that would inevitably fail, fine. I would keep my career separate from my family life entirely. When the Meridian Cosmetics campaign launched 6 weeks later and my face appeared on billboards throughout the region, I didn't mention it on Sunday dinner. When Vogue Italia called about a potential cover shoot, I didn't share the news either. When my booking fee tripled after the first campaign success, I kept that information to myself as well. Instead, I created the perfect cover story. I told them I had taken a job at Lumière Fashion House, which was technically true since I did work with their brand on various projects. I just omitted the detail that I was their featured model rather than their employee. When they asked about my work, I kept the descriptions vague, helping with events, working with customers, learning about the fashion industry from the ground floor. The lie became easier to maintain when I realized how much they preferred this version of my story. Cassie working in retail was something they could understand and categorize. It fit their narrative of a young woman finding her way in the world, gaining practical experience before settling into something more substantial. They could give advice about retail work, share wisdom about customer service, and feel useful in guiding my career development. But Cassie the supermodel? That was threatening to their worldview in ways I hadn't anticipated. It suggested that success could come through means they didn't understand or control. It implied that their youngest daughter might be living a life completely outside their experience or advice. It meant that the person they thought they knew better than anyone else was actually a stranger. So I became a stranger to myself instead, splitting my identity into 2 completely separate versions. In my professional life, I was confident, powerful, in demand.
In my family life, I was uncertain, seeking guidance, still figuring things out. The psychological cost of maintaining this double existence would only become clear much later, when the weight of living two lives began to crush the authentic person caught between them. What my family didn't see during those 3 years of thinking I was finding myself in retail was that I was actually building an empire. While they worried about my career prospects on Sunday dinners, I was becoming one of the most recognizable faces in fashion. While Vivienne bragged about her marketing campaigns to local clients, I was shooting campaigns that would be seen by millions across 4 continents. The transformation happened faster than anyone in the industry expected, including myself. 6 months after that disastrous family dinner at Bellacorte, I booked my first Vogue cover. Not the main US edition, but Vogue Australia, which in the modeling world is still considered a massive achievement. The shoot was in Sydney, and I spent 5 days working with photographer Mario Testino in locations that looked like they belonged in a dream. When I called home from the Sydney Opera House during a break in shooting, my mother asked if I was enjoying my little vacation and reminded me not to spend too much money on souvenirs. I was standing there in a $50,000 Valentino gown that had been flown in specifically for the shoot, being paid more for that day than my father earned in 3 months, and she thought I was on some budget backpacking trip.
The Vogue Australia cover opened doors I didn't even know existed. Suddenly, every major fashion house wanted to work with the new face everyone was talking about. Chanel booked me for their spring campaign, Dior offered me an exclusive fragrance contract, Versace wanted me for Milan Fashion Week. My calendar went from having occasional local shoots to being booked solid for months in advance. But perhaps the most surreal moment came 8 months after my family had dismissed modeling as not a real career. I was in Paris for Fashion Week, having just walked in 7 different shows over 4 days. It was 2 a.m., and I was finally back in my suite at the Plaza Athénée, exhausted but exhilarated. My phone buzzed with a text from Vivienne. "Hope you're not working too late at the store tonight. Get some rest." I was sitting in one of the most expensive hotel suites in Paris, wearing an Hermès robe that had been gifted to me by the brand, with a bottle of champagne sent up by the hotel manager to congratulate me on a successful week. Through my window, I could see the Eiffel Tower lit up against the night sky. Tomorrow, I would be flying to Milan on a private jet arranged by Versace for their VIP models. And my sister thought I was stocking shelves at a clothing store. The financial reality of my success was something I could never have explained to them, even if I'd wanted to. My first year's earnings exceeded what my parents had made in the previous 5 years combined. By my second year, I was making more per month than most people's annual salaries. The contract renewals and exclusive deals meant that even if I never worked another day, I could live comfortably for the rest of my life. I bought the penthouse in Meridian City during my second year, paying cash for a property that cost $3.2 million. The real estate agent kept asking about financing options and mortgage pre-approval letters until I finally had to explain that I would be wire transferring the full amount. When she asked what I did for work, I told her I was in fashion. She assumed I meant I owned a boutique. The isolation of living this double life became more pronounced as my success grew. At family gatherings, I would sit quietly while relatives discussed their career struggles, student loan payments, and retirement planning. Uncle Frank would complain about trying to save for his daughter's college tuition, while I was donating more than his annual salary to scholarship funds. Cousin Sarah would stress about affording her wedding, while I was turning down endorsement deals worth more than most people's homes. The guilt was overwhelming. During Christmas dinner my second year, I watched my parents debate whether they could afford to replace their 15-year-old car. That same week, I had bought a Tesla Model S without thinking twice about the price. I wanted desperately to help them, to solve their financial worries with a simple bank transfer. But how could I explain having that kind of money without revealing everything? The fashion industry connections I was making were beyond anything my family could have imagined. I had Anna Wintour's personal phone number. Giorgio Armani had created custom pieces specifically for me.
I'd had dinner with celebrities whose movies my family went to see, never knowing that their daughter and sister was sitting at the same table discussing upcoming projects and collaborations. One particularly painful moment came during Vivienne's engagement party planning. She was stressed about the catering budget, trying to figure out how to afford the kind of elegant affair she wanted without going into debt. I was sitting at her kitchen table, listening to her calculate costs down to the napkin rentals, knowing that I had spent more on a single pair of shoes the week before than her entire party budget. But what truly broke my heart was watching how my perceived failure affected the family dynamic. At holiday gatherings, I became the cautionary tale. "Poor Cassie," they'd whisper, "still hasn't found her direction." Extended family members would ask my parents, with that particular tone reserved for discussing family disappointments, "How's Cassie doing? Still working at that little shop?" My mother developed a habit of changing the subject whenever someone asked about my career. My father would give vague responses about me gaining experience in retail. Vivienne started introducing me to her friends as my sister who's still figuring things out. I had become the family member they were slightly embarrassed by, the one whose lack of traditional success reflected poorly on their parenting and guidance. Meanwhile, my professional reputation was skyrocketing. Fashion photographers fought to book me. Designers created entire collections inspired by shoots I'd done. My social media following reached millions, though I carefully kept it separate from any family connections. Articles were written about my influence on fashion trends and my ability to sell out products simply by wearing them. The cognitive dissonance became almost unbearable. I would leave family dinners where I'd been treated like a charity case and go directly to industry events where I was treated like royalty. I would sit through lectures about financial responsibility from relatives who made in a year what I earned in a week. I would accept career advice from people whose most sophisticated professional achievement was a promotion to middle management. The most painful irony was that my success in modeling had given me exactly the kind of confidence and sophistication that my family claimed I lacked. In professional settings, I was articulate, decisive, and commanding. I negotiated million-dollar contracts, managed complex international schedules, and built strategic partnerships with global brands. But at family gatherings, I reverted to being quiet, uncertain Cassie who needed guidance and support.
The breaking point came 6 months ago when my cousin Jessica, the only family member I'd trusted with any version of the truth, pulled me aside at our grandmother's birthday party. She'd been watching me carefully throughout the evening, noticing details that others missed: the quality of my jewelry, the cut of my supposedly affordable dress, the way I carried myself when I thought no one was looking. "Cassie," she said quietly, "I don't know what you're really doing for work, but I know it's not retail. Your bag costs more than my rent. Your watch is Cartier. Either you're living way beyond your means, or there's something you're not telling us." For a moment, I considered telling her everything, but the web of lies had become so complex, so integral to family dynamics, that pulling one thread threatened to unravel everything. Instead, I gave her the same vague responses I'd been practicing for 3 years. As I drove home that night, I realized that tomorrow's Vogue announcement would finally end this exhausting double life. Whether I was ready or not, the truth was about to come out. The question was, would my family be ready for it? The phone call that would change absolutely everything came at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks before Vivienne's housewarming party. I was in my Meridian City penthouse, sipping coffee and reviewing contracts for an upcoming Bulgari jewelry campaign, when my phone rang with a number I recognized immediately: Anna Wintour's direct line. In the fashion industry, when Anna Wintour calls you personally, you answer. It doesn't matter if you're in the middle of a shoot, a meeting, or sound asleep. When the most powerful woman in fashion wants to speak with you, everything else stops. I had worked with Vogue before, but always through intermediaries: agents, editors, creative directors. Anna herself had never called me directly. Serafina,
she said in that distinctive voice that has launched and ended countless careers. "I need to see you in my office this afternoon. Can you be in New York by 3?" I was on a plane within 2 hours. The flight from Meridian City to New York gave me time to wonder what this could possibly be about. Anna Wintour doesn't summon models to casual meetings. Every interaction with her is calculated, purposeful, and usually career-defining. As the plane descended into LaGuardia, I ran through every possible scenario in my mind, none of which prepared me for what was actually about to happen. The Vogue offices in Manhattan are intimidating under normal circumstances, but walking into Anna Wintour's personal office feels like entering the throne room of fashion royalty. The walls are lined with iconic covers spanning decades of the magazine's history. The desk, pristine and imposing, sits before floor-to-ceiling windows that look out over the city that never sleeps. And behind that desk sat the woman who could make or break careers with a single decision. "Sit," she said, without looking up from the proofs she was reviewing. I sat in the chair across from her desk, trying to project the confidence that had made me successful, while internally wondering if I was about to be fired from jobs I didn't even know I was being considered for. When she finally looked up, those famous eyes assessed me with the kind of clinical precision that had made her legendary. "Do you know why you're here?" "I honestly have no idea," I admitted, deciding that honesty was probably my best strategy. She smiled, actually smiled, which was somehow more terrifying than if she had scowled. "You're here because you're about to become the face of fashion history. Vogue is celebrating its 130th anniversary next month, and we're planning the most significant issue in the magazine's history. We want you as our cover model." The words didn't compute immediately. Vogue's 130th anniversary issue wasn't just another magazine cover. It was a cultural moment that would be studied, archived, and referenced for decades to come. Previous anniversary issues had featured legends like Naomi Campbell, Kate Moss, and Gisele Bündchen. Being chosen for this cover meant being officially recognized as one of the defining faces of fashion. "I don't understand," I said, still processing what she had told me. Anna leaned back in her chair, studying me with those penetrating eyes. "Experience is irrelevant. History is being written, not repeated. You represent something new, something fresh that still honors everything this magazine stands for. The camera loves you in a way that can't be taught or manufactured. You have that rare quality that transcends fashion and becomes cultural impact." She slid a folder across her desk toward me. "The shoot is scheduled for next month with Stephen Meisel. The concept is the future of fashion, and you'll be wearing pieces from 12 different designers, each representing a different decade of Vogue's history, reimagined for the modern era. This isn't just a cover. It's a 20-page editorial spread that will define how fashion is perceived for the next generation." I opened the folder and sought preliminary sketches, mood boards, and a creative brief that was more elaborate than most Hollywood movie productions. The scale of this project was beyond anything I had ever been involved in. This wasn't just modeling. This was art, culture, and history being created simultaneously. "There's something else," Anna continued, her voice taking on a tone I had never heard from her before, something almost maternal. "This announcement will change your life in ways you haven't anticipated. When this cover is revealed, you won't just be a successful model anymore. You'll be a household name. Your privacy will disappear. Your personal life will become public property. Are you prepared for that level of exposure?" The question hit me like a physical blow, because it forced me to confront something I had been avoiding for 3 years. My family still had no idea about my career. They thought I was struggling to make ends meet working in retail. In 3 weeks, when this announcement went public, that illusion would be shattered in the most dramatic way possible. "My family doesn't know," I said quietly, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "They think I work at a clothing store. They have no idea about any of this." Anna's expression didn't change, but I could see something shift in her eyes. "That's going to be a problem.
When this cover is announced, there will be media attention unlike anything you've experienced. Entertainment reporters will dig into your background, your family will be contacted for quotes, your childhood friends will be interviewed. Your entire life story will become public knowledge within hours of the announcement. The reality of what she was saying began to sink in. There would be no more hiding, no more carefully constructed cover stories, no more living a double life. My family would learn about my success not from me, but from entertainment news reports and social media posts. They would discover that their struggling daughter and sister had been living a lie for 3 years. I have a choice to make, I said, more to myself than to Anna. Yes, you do. You can either tell them yourself, on your terms, or let them find out when the rest of the world does. But understand this, once we make this announcement, there's no going back. Your life, as you know it, ends, and your life as a public figure begins. She stood up from her desk and walked to the window, looking out over the city that had launched 1,000 dreams and crushed just as many. I've seen what fame does to people, especially young women in this industry. Some rise to meet it, and some are destroyed by it. The difference usually comes down to having a support system that understands who you really are. The implication was clear. I needed to decide whether my family could be that support system or whether I was about to face the biggest moment of my career completely alone. How long do I have to decide? I asked. The announcement goes live in 3 weeks. The cover will be revealed simultaneously across all our platforms with coordinated media appearances starting immediately afterward. You'll need to be prepared for interviews, photo shoots, and public appearances that will establish you as the new face of high fashion. 3 weeks. In 3 weeks, every secret I had kept, every lie I had told, every careful construction of my double life would be exposed. My family would learn that their ugly duckling had not only become a swan, she had become the swan that defined beauty for an entire generation. As I left Anna's office and walked through the bustling Vogue headquarters, I realized that this wasn't just about a magazine cover anymore. This was about choosing between the safe, comfortable lies that had protected my family's perception of reality or the terrifying, exhilarating truth that would change everything forever. The elevator descended toward the street level, and with each floor that passed, I felt the weight of the decision pressing down on me. In 3 weeks, the choice would be taken away from me entirely. But right now, I still had the power to control how my family learned the truth about who I had become. The question was, did I have the courage to shatter their entire understanding of who I was? Vivienne's housewarming party was scheduled for exactly 18 hours before the Vogue announcement would go live. As I stood in my penthouse closet that Saturday afternoon, selecting what to wear to what might be the last family gathering where I could still be anonymous Cassie, the irony wasn't lost on me. In less than 24 hours, my face would be plastered across every fashion website, entertainment news outlet, and social media platform in the world. But tonight, I would still be the family disappointment who needed career advice. I chose a simple navy dress from my normal person wardrobe, the collection of unremarkable clothes I kept specifically for family events. Nothing designer, nothing that would cost more than my sister's monthly car payment, nothing that would hint at the empire I had built. The dress was from a department store, purchased specifically to maintain the illusion that I shopped where struggling retail workers shopped. As I applied minimal makeup, another carefully calculated choice to avoid looking too polished, my phone buzzed constantly with messages from my professional life. My publicist confirming final details for tomorrow's media blitz, my agent sending updates about the international campaigns that would be announced alongside the Vogue cover.
my stylist asking about wardrobe preferences for the upcoming interviews that would establish me as fashion's newest icon. Each message felt like it was coming from an alternate universe, one that would collide catastrophically with my family reality in less than a day. I silenced the phone and slipped it into my purse, next to the anxiety medication my doctor had prescribed for moments exactly like this one. The drive to Willowbrook Heights felt like traveling backward in time. Every mile took me further from the world where I was Serafina and deeper into the realm where I was still struggling Cassie. The neighborhoods grew more suburban, more familiar, more suffocating. By the time I pulled into Vivienne's driveway, I had successfully buried every trace of the confidence that made me one of the most sought-after models in the world.
Vivienne's new house was everything I expected. A pristine colonial in the most exclusive neighborhood, with a perfectly manicured lawn and a circular driveway designed to impress. The string lights were already twinkling in the backyard, and I could see caterers moving efficiently through the French doors, preparing for the kind of elegant affair that Vivienne excelled at orchestrating. But what I hadn't expected was the guest list. As I walked through the front door, I realized that Vivienne had invited not just her immediate social circle, but what appeared to be half of Willowbrook Heights' elite society. The mayor and his wife were admiring the crown molding in the foyer. The president of the country club was discussing property values with my father in the living room. 3 couples from Trevor's law firm were gathered around the kitchen island, sampling the catered appetizers. This wasn't just a housewarming party. It was a carefully orchestrated social event designed to establish Vivienne and Trevor as the newest power couple in Willowbrook Heights society. Every guest had been selected for maximum social impact, every detail planned to generate the kind of buzz that would elevate their status in the community hierarchy. And I was the family disappointment who would be displayed as evidence of their charitable nature toward less successful relatives. "Cassie!" Vivienne swept toward me in a designer dress that probably cost more than my fake retail salary for 3 months. "I'm so glad you could make it. Come meet everyone. They're dying to hear about your little job downtown." The condescension in her voice was so subtle that anyone overhearing would think she was being supportive. But I caught the emphasis on little, the dismissive tone that established immediately that my presence here was more about family obligation than genuine celebration of my achievements. As she led me through the crowd, introducing me with variations of, "This is my sister Cassie, she works at a boutique in the city," I felt the familiar sensation of shrinking into myself. The confident woman who could command a photo shoot with A-list photographers disappeared, replaced by awkward, uncertain Cassie who needed guidance and support. But something was different tonight. Maybe it was knowing that in 18 hours, these same people would be Googling my name and finding interviews where I discussed million-dollar contracts. Maybe it was the weight of carrying such a massive secret for so long. Or maybe it was simply that the cognitive dissonance between my two identities had finally reached a breaking point. Whatever the reason, I found myself paying attention to details I had previously ignored. The way conversations shifted when I joined them, as if my lack of traditional success was contagious. The pitying looks from women who had built their identities around their husbands' achievements. The patronizing tone of men who assumed that anyone working in retail couldn't possibly understand complex topics like investments or business strategy. Uncle Frank cornered me near the bar, his face already flushed from champagne and his own sense of importance. "Still working at that store, Cassie? You know, my accountant's daughter just got promoted to regional manager at Nordstrom. Maybe I could put in a word for you, help you aim a little higher than boutique work." I smiled politely and thanked him for the offer, all well knowing that my last contract renewal was worth more than his accounting firm's annual revenue. The absurdity of the situation was becoming almost unbearable. But the real tension began when Mrs. Thornfield arrived with her mysterious guest, Rebecca Morrison, the woman who claimed to be a talent scout from the fashion industry. I watched from across the patio as Mrs. Thornfield whispered conspiratorially to Vivienne, clearly planning some kind of intervention for poor, directionless Cassie.
"Vivienne tells me you might be interested in modeling," Rebecca said when she was finally introduced to me, her voice carrying the particular tone that industry people use when they're about to deliver disappointing news gently. "It's such a challenging field, but I always like to help young women understand their options." The setup was so perfectly orchestrated that I almost had to admire it. Here was Vivienne playing the caring sister by arranging for a fashion industry professional to explain to me why my dreams were unrealistic. Mrs. Thornfield was positioned as the wise family friend who had connected us, and Rebecca was cast as the expert who would deliver the gentle but firm reality check that would finally convince me to pursue something more practical. What none of them realized was that they were about to have this conversation with someone who had already achieved everything Rebecca claimed was impossible. Someone whose name was whispered with respect in the same fashion houses where Rebecca probably bagged for entry-level positions. Someone who would be revealed as fashion royalty in less than 18 hours. As Rebecca began her condescending explanation of why girls like me rarely succeed in modeling, describing in detail the exact career I had already built, I felt something shift inside me. The careful control I had maintained for 3 years was starting to crack. The weight of living this lie was becoming unbearable. And then came the moment that would change everything. Rebecca, in her effort to demonstrate her industry expertise, began talking about the models who had achieved the kind of success that girls like me could only dream of. She mentioned Serafina specifically, describing my own career achievements to my face while explaining why someone like me could never achieve them. Models like Serafina are genetic lottery winners. They have something that can't be taught or acquired. They're born to be superstars. I stood there, holding my champagne glass and listening to this woman explain why I could never become myself, while my sister and her friends nodded sagely as if they were receiving profound wisdom about an industry they knew nothing about.
The moment stretched out like a held breath. Tomorrow, Rebecca would discover that she had just explained to Serafina herself why Serafina was so special. Tomorrow, my sister would realize that she had spent 3 years introducing me as a retail worker, while I was actually one of the most famous models in the world. Tomorrow, everyone at this party would understand that they had been patronizing someone whose success dwarfed all of their achievements combined. But right now, in this moment, I still had a choice. I could maintain the lie for 18 more hours and let them discover the truth through entertainment news and social media. Or I could end the charade right here, right now, in front of everyone who had spent years underestimating me. As Rebecca continued her explanation of why modeling success was impossible for someone like me, I felt the last threads of my carefully constructed double life beginning to snap. I set my champagne glass down on the patio table with deliberate precision, the soft clink of crystal against stone somehow cutting through the evening air like a signal. Rebecca was still mid-sentence, explaining to the assembled group why genetic lottery winners like Serafina were fundamentally different from regular girls like me when I made the decision that would end 3 years of living a lie. "Actually," I said, my voice carrying a tone that hadn't been heard at a family gathering in over 3 years, "I think you might be surprised by what regular girls can accomplish." The conversation around us began to quiet as something in my demeanor shifted visibly. The awkward, uncertain Cassie who had been nodding politely at career advice was disappearing, replaced by someone else entirely, someone confident, someone who belonged in rooms where million-dollar decisions were made. Rebecca paused, clearly sensing the change but not understanding what it meant. "Well, of course anyone can try, but the statistics, I interrupted gently, don't account for the fact that sometimes the person you're talking to isn't who you think they are." I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone, opening it to my official Instagram account, the one with 4.2 million followers, the one that fashion magazines reposted, the one that luxury brands paid extraordinary sums to be featured on. I handed it to Rebecca, whose face went through a remarkable transformation as she realized what she was looking at. "Serafina," she whispered, the word barely audible. Her hand began to shake slightly as she scrolled through photos of me in Versace campaigns, on magazine covers, walking runways in Milan and Paris. You're Serafina." The patio fell completely silent.
Mrs. Thornfield's mouth dropped open. Vivienne's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and then something approaching horror as the implications began to sink in. My father, who had been discussing property taxes with the mayor, stopped mid-sentence and turned toward our group. "I don't understand," Vivienne said, her voice thin and uncertain. "Cassie, what is she talking about? What is that?" I took my phone back from Rebecca's trembling hands and turned the screen toward my sister. "This is what I actually do for work, Vivienne. I'm Serafina. I've been Serafina for 3 years." The silence that followed was deafening. You could hear the soft jazz playing through the outdoor speakers, the distant hum of traffic from the main road, the gentle splash of water from the decorative fountain. But no one spoke, no one moved. Everyone at the party seemed frozen in place, trying to process information that didn't fit into their understanding of reality. Uncle Frank was the first to break the silence, his voice cracking slightly. But you work at a store. You said you work at a boutique." "I work with Lumière Fashion House as their featured model. Last month's campaign generated more revenue in 1 week than most boutiques see in an entire year." Mrs. Thornfield, who had been so eager to help solve my career problems, looked like she might faint. "The Serafina? The one on the Dior billboards? The one who was on the cover of Vogue?" "3 Vogue covers," I said quietly. 4 if you count tomorrow's announcement." Rebecca, who had been staring at me like I was an apparition, suddenly found her voice. "Tomorrow's announcement? The 130th anniversary issue?" I nodded. "That's why I'm here tonight instead of in New York preparing for the media interviews. Because in 18 hours, this conversation becomes impossible. In 18 hours, everyone will know who I am." The weight of that statement seemed to hit everyone simultaneously. Tomorrow, their daughter, sister, niece, the family member they had spent 3 years pitying and patronizing, would be revealed as one of the most successful models in the world. The girl they thought was struggling to make ends meet working retail had actually been earning more money than all of them combined. Vivienne finally found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "The magazines in my living room, the ones with her on the cover, that's you. That's me. The Cartier campaign that was everywhere last Christmas, that was you. That was me. The Times Square billboard that Trevor takes pictures of whenever we're in the city because he thinks the model is so beautiful, that's you. That's me." The mayor's wife, who had been silent throughout this exchange, suddenly stepped forward. "My daughter has your poster on her bedroom wall. She wants to be a model because of you. She practices posing like you do in the Valentino ads."
The revelation was spreading through the party like ripples in a pond. Conversations were stopping as people overheard fragments of what was happening. Phones were being pulled out as guests began searching for confirmation of what they were hearing. The elegant housewarming party was transforming into something entirely different. Trevor appeared at Vivienne's side, having heard enough of the conversation to understand what was happening. "You're telling us that you're actually famous? Like internationally famous?" "Yes." "And you've been pretending to work in retail for 3 years?" "Yes." "Why?" Vivienne's voice broke on the word, and I could see tears beginning to form in her eyes. "Why would you lie to us? Why would you let us treat you like a failure? Like someone who needed their guidance and pity? Like the family disappointment who couldn't quite get her life together?" She didn't finish the sentence, but we all heard what she meant. This was the moment I had been dreading for 3 years, but now that it was here, I felt an unexpected sense of relief. The weight of carrying this secret, of living this double life, was finally lifting. Because 3 years ago, when I tried to tell you about my first modeling contract, you told me it wasn't a real career. You said I was being naive and that I should focus on something practical. So I stopped trying to share my successes with you. My father, who had been listening from the edge of the group, stepped closer. "Cassie, sweetheart, we were just trying to protect you. The modeling industry has such a high failure rate." "I haven't failed, Dad. I've succeeded. Beyond anything any of us imagined possible. But you never gave me the chance to show you that." The party around us had essentially stopped.
Every guest was either listening directly to our conversation or whispering frantically about what they were hearing. Mrs. Thornfield was showing people the photos on my Instagram account. Rebecca was making phone calls, presumably to colleagues in the industry who wouldn't believe what she was telling them. "The penthouse," my mother said suddenly, appearing beside my father. "When we drove by that building in Meridian City last month, and you said you'd love to live somewhere like that. I do live somewhere like that. The top floor. The Tesla in the parking garage at Christmas dinner? Mine. When you paid for dinner at Bella Corte last spring and said it was a work bonus? It was, from the Bulgari campaign." Each revelation was like another piece of a puzzle falling into place, creating a picture that was completely different from the one they thought they knew. Their struggling daughter was actually more successful than anyone in the family. Their career disappointment was actually an international icon. Their ugly duckling was actually the definition of beauty for an entire generation. Vivienne sat down heavily in one of the patio chairs, staring at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "You called me the ugly duckling tonight, in front of everyone. I introduced you as someone who needed help figuring out her life." The pain in her voice was real, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt genuinely sorry for my sister. Not because she was mean or cruel, but because she had been living in a reality that was completely false, and I had helped create that reality. Tomorrow, when the Vogue announcement goes live, reporters are going to want to interview you. They're going to ask about growing up with me, about our family dynamic, about whether you always knew I would be successful. What are you going to tell them? The question hung in the air like a challenge and an opportunity. Tomorrow, my family would have the chance to rewrite our story. They could either embrace the truth and celebrate what I had accomplished, or they could struggle with the fact that they had completely misjudged someone they thought they knew better than anyone else. Uncle Frank, who had spent the evening offering to help me aim higher than boutique work, raised his champagne glass with a shaky hand. To Cassie, who flew higher than any of us ever imagined. As the glasses around the patio were raised in a toast that should have happened 3 years ago, I realized that sometimes the people who love you most are the ones who need the longest time to see you clearly. But when they finally do, when the truth finally comes out, the recognition is worth every moment you spent waiting for it. Tomorrow, the whole world would know that Serafina and Cassie Vale were the same person. But tonight, finally, my family knew it too.